dedication ceremony. Good to see you, Caroline. I'll share with you some thoughts about Ernie's career and how he's personally touched my family. Everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with Ernie's story. That's not the case for the general population. One of the Boy Scouts in our troop lives down the street from Ernie, and one day I asked him, hey, you know about Mr. Plantz? Well, I know him. I said, do you know his background? He didn't, so I shared a little bit with him. I'll do that with you, and then I'll tell you how he really touched my family. Ernie was born April 3rd, 1920, joined the Navy in 1940, and was assigned to the battleship, USS New Mexico. Then he got smart and he volunteered for the submarine force. He went to the USS Perch, SS-176. And then 7 December 1941 happened. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and their goal was, hey, let's knock out the military might in the Pacific theater. That way the United States will negotiate a peace settlement, and they can keep their expansion, they can keep their oil, their rubber, their natural resources. Well, obviously the U.S. response, we're not going to have any of that. We're going to send the Perch out to the Java Sea. So Ernie went to the Java Sea and this is Perch. And on the evening of 1 March 1942, Perch is on the surface, steaming full speed. We had intel that the Japanese were going to land at Surabaya, Java, near the island nation of Borneo, to continue their expansion. Perch's job was to track that convoy to transport ships and take them out. Well, Perch was sighted by a couple of Japanese destroyers. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Hurt, had to give the order, take her down to 180 feet, prepare for depth charge attack. So as Perch is submerging, when they pass 100 feet, it starts. Click, and then a boom. That's the first depth charge. And over the next 2 days, the Japanese dropped 71 depth charges trying to take Perch out. So ship is submerging. They didn't get to 180 feet. They got to 147 feet, and they slammed into the muddy bottom. Now, well, the CO, he gave the order to go to 180 feet. Well, the chart, water depth is 200 feet. So, but it's always the CO's fault, right? So there the Perch is stuck in the mud, 147 feet. The Japanese are dropping depth charges. Flooding. The damage is so severe, the oil and air that's released, the Japanese think, hey, we sunk the Perch. They leave. Perch is able to free themselves. Now they only have the port main engine because of the damage. They get back on the surface at 0300, now on the 2nd of March. They assess the damage, make repairs if they can, and as true submariners, they go about their business. They set a course to intercept this convoy of Japanese transport ships. Well, 47 minutes later, at 0347, they're spotted again. Japanese destroyers come in. Perch now this time submerges, gets to the bottom, about 200 feet. And from 0347 to 0830, the Japanese continue to drop depth charges. That's where the remainder of the 71 come into play. I cannot imagine, being in a tin can, never knowing if that's going to be the last sound you're going to hear. The flooding was immense. Again, the damage was so severe, the oil and the air and debris that escaped, the Japanese said, hey, we're confident now, we sunk the Perch. They leave the area. So now, the Perch sits on the bottom for the entire day. They can't surface during daylight, so they have to survive through the day, and they do so. On the evening of 2 March, they come back up, and they spend the rest of the night hours trying to fix things. Both of their periscope masts are flooded. Communications mast is flooded. The deck gun doesn't work anymore. They still only have one main engine. So 0500, the CO says, well, time to do a test dive. Let's do a trim dive to see if our repairs work. Well, they do that, and the flooding is severe. They've got to struggle to just get back up on the surface. But now the sun comes up, and reality's starting to set in. Now they're spotted by 2 cruisers and 4 destroyers, and the shells start coming over. CO did the only thing he could at that point. He orders to abandon ship. Well, everybody got that word except for young Ernest. They called him the kid because he was the youngest sailor on board the Perch. Everyone's going over to the side. They're going to scuttle the ship and sink her. And it takes one of the other sailors to stick their head down the hatch and say, Ernie! He's down the forward pump room trying to restore an AC motor. He gets the word and ends up in the water with the other 59 members of the Perch, and They get picked up by the Japanese, and Ernie spends 1,297 days as a Japanese POW. Torture. At one point he was down to 88 pounds. Tells us he held the record for getting hit in the butt with a baseball bat for 75 times. Spent a week in a coma due to malaria, and one of the fellow prisoners, I think who was a doctor, injected him with something from a tree sap, and he survived that, obviously. The man's got a survival instinct, for sure. So Ernie comes back, the war is over, he's liberated, it takes about a year to recover, and then he continues his Navy career, and a fabulous career. And I'm sure one of his highlights was when he was chief of the boat of Spikefish. He did 2 tours on a tender and then finished as a lieutenant doing 2 tours at the submarine school, which I know is a great job there. And then he went on to a lifetime of community service, including with the Lions. So fantastic. Now let me transition to how he's kind of personally touched our family. We were visiting Caroline and Ernie not too long ago, and it was probably early October, and I saw some balloons in the house. I said, what is that about? Well, Ernie and Caroline celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary the 25th September of this year. So it's worth a round of applause. Now, my oldest son, he interviewed Ernie for an English project he was doing. And Ernie always talked about his shipmates and not about what he did or what he went through. It's all about other people. And at the end of this interview, Ben said, well, knowing that you would have been captured and you would have suffered torture for over 3 years, would you have done it all over again? Would you have joined the Navy? And without hesitation, Ernie looked at my son and said, absolutely. I think that had a big impact on Ben. Absolutely, a true American hero. When Ben was inducted in the National Honor Society, you get to pick a role model who they recognize at the ceremony. Ben chose Ernie. And of course, Ernie obliged and showed up. And it was wonderful. I remember racing to get down to the cafeteria for the food afterwards. Ernie was pushing along. He goes quicker than most people, without the walker. So maybe there's some wheels on that that assist him in moving. Ben had his Eagle Scout ceremony and invited Ernie to come, and he made a sub-vets presentation there. And it wasn't until about a week before that ceremony I recognized, hey, that's the same day as the sub ball in April that we always have. And for the 30 years I was in the Navy, every time I was here at the sub ball in Groton, Ernie was always the oldest submariner and he cuts the cake with the admiral. So I said to Caroline, uh-oh, you're going to get a lot of phone calls if Ernie doesn't show up for this. She goes, no, Eagles, that has a higher priority. He can always go to the sub ball. So that was really special to us. And then at sub school, all the new submarines go through sub school and we teach the sailors how to be submariners. And we name each of the classes, which is about 80 or 90 sailors after World War II submarine. And one of them was the Perch class. So we had Ernie come, and Ernie was the guest speaker. He did not talk about Ernie Plantz, he talked about his shipmates. What great time he had in the Navy and all the people he served with. Again, our humble hero. But we had arranged the ceremony so at the end, Ernie could stay seated and we'd hand out the certificates of graduation, as he stayed seated. Ernie wasn't having any of that. He stood on the platform and handed out all 90 certificates and gave words of encouragement to each and every one. And then, when I think about it, it goes back to when I graduated from the Naval Academy, we had Ronald Reagan come, and the class there is about 1,000. And we were told, hey, Ronald Reagan's going to give out the certificates to the first 100 people. That wasn't me. So I was like, oh, well, maybe next time. But when Ronald Reagan showed up, after the first one, he said, I'm not doing that. He stood there and handed out every 1,000 and shook hands. So there's a good parallel between those two men, great Americans. So very special. And lastly, every time I would go visit Ernie, he would always ask, how's my lovely wife doing? Now, Jackie's been battling cancer, and I share it with you because one day we went and visited Ernie, and we got home, she looked at me, and she had tears in her eyes. She says, you don't believe what Ernie said to me tonight. He said, what I went through as a POW with nothing with the battle you're fighting. I can't imagine, that just hit us right in the heart, So he's been a very special part of our life, and it's been great. The best thing at sub school is get to know Ernie and Caroline, and the time we got to share with them, because they're really, really special people. And this event is so fantastic, because his story needs to be told. There is a new book that's coming out, because Ernie's highlighted in presumed loss in the men, but there is a book dedicated to Ernie's entire life stories. Steve Jackson, where's he at? There's the author, he's with us here today. But rumor has it the book is 176 pages long, the whole number. And rumor has it the cost is $12.97. The number of days Ernie spent as a POW. So easy to remember. I know that's on my Christmas list for a number of my family members that had the pleasure to meet Ernie through different functions over the years. But again, it's an honor to me to stand here and be part of this ceremony, because Ernie is a true example of selfless dedication, a national hero, national asset that we have the benefit of just living amongst us. And the ramp, as I think about that in the future, people are going to say, Ernie Plantz, who's that? Well, here's a book, read it, learn his story, because we need more of that, and especially our youth. Our youth needs to understand men like Ernie Plantz and the sacrifices they make, because that's what's going to turn our country around and make it great. So again, thank you for inviting me today, and sing with your father. Fantastic Americans, and their stories, need to get out there and be told. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain McHale, for that heartfelt presentation. I'm sure everybody appreciated it. Now, Jan Roberta has a special gift for Ernie that I think she'll present to Caroline right now, but then she'll be presenting it directly to Ernie afterward.
All right, thank you. First I want to say, so I'm Jan Roberta. I grew up in Ledyard, class of 72, so it's wonderful for me to be able to come down this way and start giving some quotes of valor. I had the pleasure of giving one to my old guidance counselor, Mr. Olson, and I had no idea he was. A very interesting thing is I graduated in 72, so that was the era of the guys with the long hair and us trying to show our little midriffs and have hip huggers and bell bottoms and slouchy and a little probably not well kept. I never understood until about 45 years later when I heard about Mr. Olson. He used to stand at the door sometimes and he'd tell the boys to tuck their shirt in, he'd tell them to stand up, he'd tell the girls to button their shirts up or sweaters, put on a sweater. And I used to think, what's with this guy? Well, I know I now get it. And it was just this awesome, I didn't even know I had this unanswered question in my brain for the last 45 years. So it was one of those really nice, came, full circle, oh, I get it. And so thank you to your father for that. So, and I had the pleasure of presenting him with a quilt. And the very nice thing is we were going to give it to him on his birthday, and somebody said, let's, I had said to the guys up in Knowledge, let's just go ahead and do it, and they agreed. And so I got to go with my 4 Marine League six. They're like little brothers to me, even though a lot of them are older than me, but got to go and present the quilt. So that was a great honor. And in doing the quilt for Mr. Olson, it made me want to come back to my roots. Grew up in a Navy town, so I know there's a lot of veterans, and I knew Ernie's story because he was at the senior citizens with my parents, and Nancy and my sister were best friends back in high school, very good friends. So I had heard his story over time, and I had the pleasure of seeing his wife at Pete's, Mr. Olson's wake. So I was very happy to connect and say, can we find a time to do this for Ernie? I will go to his house this afternoon, tomorrow evening, Monday morning, whatever, middle of the night, whatever they want. Make sure whatever it takes to get a quilt to Mr. Plantz. So what we do is Quilts of Valor started about 12 years ago. There was a mom whose son went over to Iraq. She was very nervous about it, and what she did when she was nervous was sew. So she sat down and made a patriotic quilt, and she couldn't figure out how to get it to him. But she took it down to Bethesda, Maryland, and had it blessed, and it was given out by the chaplain there to a young man who had come back from Iraq who was wounded. He said, this really went well. Could we just do it again? and again and again and again. And it started out very simply at her table, her friends. She had a relative in another state, so it sort of spread a little bit. A few years ago, it was on a news program on a Sunday night, and so it's become well-known, or more well-known. I hadn't heard about it until 2 years ago. But what we do is make quilts to, and it started out being given to active military that was coming back. What it now we say is that quilts of valor for anyone touched by war, and the only time I've seen it given really to civilians is the men and women who work at Dover base, where the when someone dies in the war and they come back before their family, they prepare them for their families. And I think they deserve to have them. So everyone gets a case, and that started out because in our group, I have a group, Deb McKenzie, who is Deb Brooks, grew up right down in Gales Ferry, and she is class of 72 and has a quilt shop up in Franklin, Stitch Chicks. So I found her on Facebook because I do the reunion, and this talked me right into quitting, or well, retiring early from my state job as a social worker, so I could do this full time. So there's 25 or so of us ladies, and occasionally we suck a couple guys into it, and we do know that all military guys know some sewing. So you're all welcome to join us. So, you can't say, I don't know how to sew, because we know you do. So our group tends to make our cases a little bit matchy-matchy, but they get a case, they get a letter that tells them who made the quilt, and it tells who piece together the top, and anybody who quilts will know it could be 4, 5, 6 people working on it. And then it tells who did the quilting on it. We tend to use a quilting pattern that has a patriotic flair to it, so you'll see stars on the quilting part. And then and it tells who did the binding and who made the case. It tells the history of quilts of valor. So it's a very nice little history to have. I'll just keep that right here. Each quilt comes with a Quilts of Valor label, and this is something that can, so I've got Lieutenant Ernest Plantz and U.S. Navy, and it tells again who made it and when it was presented, and thanks him for his service. A Quilt of Valor is made to remind our service people that we, what we consider it as, I was not in the military, but my dad was in World War II, and I had a brother in the Air Force, a brother in the Navy, and I've got a nephew that's a Marine. He was active duty for a certain amount of time, but I understand Marines are once a Marine, always a Marine. Yes. I've been reminded that many times. And, so this quilt was made by quite a few different people. I'll just show you. Normally we do a little bit more, but I'll show you. Absolutely. So we'll kind of get over here so that you can see it.
Oh.
So, and this one, somebody came in and they gave me this panel here. They had made it, and they decided they made another one so we could have it. And then somebody else finished this. Someone made the stars. Somebody put the stars on, and then I actually did the quilting on this one. But so they're large. They've all been washed. So we know that they're not going to fade or shrink, or we use really nice fabric on them. And normally what I would do is, what I will do when I see Mr. Plantz, Ernie, is, can I just do this? Stand here a minute, come here a minute. I'll just show you. This is what we do. So we go pretend he's already planned for a second. But we would wrap him in it like this, and this is what you'll see. We'll make sure that pictures come, and we'll wrap him up. And and you can always pull threads off the quilt. But we'll wrap him in it, and it's to thank him and to comfort him, Mr. Plantz, and to let him know that we appreciate his service. And I'm hoping that Peter Jr. here and his family can be wrapping themselves in their dad's quilts. Right. And anytime that they feel missing their dad, they can wrap themselves in his quilt, and we hope it brings comfort to your family as well. So that's what Quilts of Valor is about. And anybody that wants to come sew with us, there's a letter back there that tells about Quilts of Valor, and it's also my contact information. We have a sewing group at the Nyannick VFW. We have one in Stitch Chicks in Norwich. And I'm actually cover southeastern Connecticut, but somehow that now includes Putnam and Danielson, so I'm not quite sure that's the same thing. But, so I think we'll be starting a group up there, and I'm working with a Lions group, I'm happy to say. I'm doing a presentation for them, and there's some wonderful Lions group up in that area, so. So I thank you, everybody, for your service, and I thank your husband for the service, and I'm looking forward to getting over to his home and giving this to him. So
Thank you.
Thank you so very much for the efforts in capturing the spirit, and Ernie and Peter, the Quilts of Valor. At this time, I have the privilege, for those that don't know, my other hat right now is I work for a person you might have heard of, Joe Courtney, and he has asked me, since he can't make it, to bring some greetings on his behalf. And this is from Congressman Joe Courtney, 2nd District, and it proudly presents the family of Lieutenant Colonel Peter I. Olson. Special recognition for the dedication of Peter I. Olson Tennis Complex in memory of his invaluable service to our nation and southeastern Connecticut community. And it's signed today by Joe Courtney. And likewise from Congressman Courtney is a certificate proudly presented to Lieutenant Ernest V. Plantz, Ledyard, Connecticut, special recognition for the dedication of the Ernest V. Plantz boat launch for his invaluable service to our nation and southeastern Connecticut community, signed by Joe Courtney. And I would like to call upon Mayor Rodoligo for a few comments.
Thank you very much. One of the great privileges I've had the past 4 years in being your mayor is to attend these types of ceremonies, and I think it's very appropriate that this is the last ceremony that I will be the last ceremony that I will be attending. Ledyard is blessed by many things, and one of the things that I think, one of the aspects of Ledyard that especially blesses us is the presence and the relationship we have with the military, both active military and in many cases those that have chosen to make Ledyard their home. And if you look throughout our government, throughout our community services, our volunteers, you just see the military woven into that. So I think it's very appropriate that we honor two of what I would call Ledyard's and America's heroes. I have somewhat of a relationship with Peter Olson. When I became mayor, I would see him quite a bit at the senior center, and I have a tie with him because we both attended the same high school in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Technical High School. 6,000 boys. If you want to know anything about where he got his foundation, just think of all the testosterone of 6,000 boys on one square city block. And I didn't know him in high school. I think he might have been in the class just ahead of me, so I didn't get to know him very well. And then when we moved here to Ledyard 44 years ago, when our children got involved in sports, my daughter Amy got involved in softball and played with his grandchildren. Yikes. Softball was more than just an activity that I thought you just went and had fun. But anyway, so obviously the apple didn't fall far from the tree there. But again, I think these are American heroes, and these are people, and I just want to follow up on one comment that was made. People have been asking me, what's your, when are you done? When's your last day? I don't know why they're asking, but I've been saying to all of them, well, on December 7th. December 7th is my last day. And I have to tell you that not one person has made any kind of either a joke or a comment about, oh, day of infamy or anything like that. And just yesterday in the office, my assistant said, well, December 7th, that's Monday, and that's the last day. And someone there in the office said, and he made a comment about, very significant day. And the person was like, what's significant about December 7th? And this was not a child, this was not a high school student or anything like that. And I think it's important that the story get out. the story get out of the heroes and what they accomplished in our country and what that means to us. So again, I thank you. I thank you all for coming. I think this is an incredible turnout for a Saturday morning. And our thanks to what Ernie and Peter represent in our community and in our nation is truly America's heroes. Thank you.
So now it's the time we have all been waiting for, and I'm going to move the podium out of the way. I'm going to ask for Mayor Rodolico to assist Peter Olson and Don Grisey to assist Carolyn in unveiling. So I'm going to get this out of the way temporarily, and then ask you to come on up. Pull it down just a little bit. So Peter, if you get on this side, Mayor, if you get on that side, and I think the easiest thing is going to be to lift it from the bottom up. Otherwise, it's not a light. Okay, are we all ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Try to get here so you can still see that. But at this point, I would like to, thank, the mayor and Don, and especially want to thank Don Grisey for all the efforts in making this dedication possible. And I'd also like to bring back Ledyard Lions President Linda Howard.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming out to honor Pete and Ernie and for all they have done for both country and community. Please join us in the back for the cutting of the cake. Okay.